Hello, everybody. This is Ben Callahan, host of The Question, and I'm very excited to welcome Shimaa Hassan as my co-host for episode 69. Shimaa, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, you and I, we were talking about this. We met because I just reached out to you cold on LinkedIn, and I was like, hey, I like what you're saying on LinkedIn. We should be friends. And so here we are. Just a testament to don't be shy, get out and connect with folks in the space. I love it that we've been able to sort of make something really fun happen with this episode. So in our conversations leading up to this, we were talking about this idea of rebuilding a design system mid-flight, which is something that you're experiencing right now in this moment. And in the conversation, this is our recap from that conversation, but we had asked 4 questions of folks. We gave them a range of for the first answer from 0 to 5. And that question was, how many times a month do you think about throwing your design system away and starting over? And I think you said, Shimaa, that you were expecting that number to be much higher than it was. Can you say a little bit about what you were thinking there?
Yeah, like with the innovation that is happening, everyone sharing their knowledge, there is new ways to architect the system. There are new Figma features that comes out, every few months. So there's always a reason to start over. So I was expecting that number to be way higher.
Yeah.
But it's 50-50, it looks like. So
Yeah, you're right. It pretty much played out in sort of a standard bell curve. I think a little bit lower in this number 2 spot, but for the most part, it's pretty much a standard curve. About 46% in the bottom half and 54% in the top half. So very even split on that one. We gave folks 3 other questions that were all open text for them to answer, and so those were, if you chose to start over, what's one decision you'd make differently on day 1? And then how do you keep product teams confident in a system that's actively being rebuilt underneath them? And then finally, we invited folks just to tell us a story about rebuilding a system mid-flight. And so we got a lot of folks really took their time and answered this episode. We sent this out to over 1,000 folks, 1,061 design system practitioners, and we got 53 responses. And as always, wherever you're watching or listening to this, you can get the link to the raw data and do your own analysis. So, all right, where to start? I think I actually want to start with this idea of something that we spent a lot of time in the deep dive talking about, which was the idea of an approach to rebuilding your system is take what you currently have, fork it, and then let people continue to use the old version while you work on the new version. And then at some point in the future, give them the tools or opportunity to migrate from one to the other. And we spent a lot of time talking about this, but as we were chatting just before this recap, what we didn't talk much about is an approach that you're taking now, which is a more iterative approach. Can you, Shimaa, just explain for us, like, how is it that you're approaching this rebuild mid-flight?
yeah, there's different ways. I mean, you have to talk to your team, and you don't have, in the design side, you don't have to copy it exactly what the engineers is going to do on the code. So for example, for us, so we took a different approach because, teams are shipping, and the current version is well adopted, but it's lacking a ton of feature that we wanted to add to the new one. So on the design side, I rebuild from scratch. So it's a completely new library. Maybe from the look of it, there is nothing different, but it's all re-architected, right? Multi-level token architecture, a new component with slots. Obviously, it's a new feature that Figma had. And then on the engineering side, they took a very different approach. They go into to be making small changes, incremental changing in the code. So nothing also going to feel different to the consumers. They're just going to be getting these updates for free. And I want to preface saying I don't have a large design system team dedicated to this. I literally have 2 engineers. So we are taking it very slow. We are planned for this. With the innovation of AI that we are adopting as well, we are making this not taking 6 months or a year. It's only weeks. So we are, leveraging everything under our belt to make this smooth and easy as possible for consumers. So, yeah.
Yeah, this is I love this. Can you give us like more detail? Like pick a component or pick like a layer in the foundations and just walk us through like sort of kind of like step by step how you've approached it in a way that's allowed for this more iterative approach to kind of like actually be successful in the org. Can you do that?
Right. So I'll tell you how I actually did it. So because with this kind of re-architecture of the system or the new system, we are supporting white labeling, multi-brand, and we're adding this semantic layer and component layer, right, in the token architecture. The current system only have primitives, typography, spacing, color. Every designer have to remember what they used before or just pick what they like, right? Yeah. So what I did is that I had the entire front end code onto my machine. And that's what I used to ask a question. Where is this gray 900 used? How many card components do we have today, right? And I used another thing to an MCB called Design System Assistant. It's extremely useful to be able to say, okay, this is my current state of the system. This is how my current architecture look like. Here are my goals and the feature that I want to support, because I talked to leadership, and this is like the things that we want to support in the new world of this new version of the system. Tell me what is, major design system do? What is the best practices? And then you just back and forth until you come to where the level of where you feel like, okay, this feels great. I'm going to create this document, propose to the team, walk them through everything. And then I'm going to start building, right? And I'm using AI to kind of like go into the Figma and start like blah, 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 creating things for me and make this very speedy. And then on the engineering side, because we're co-creating, so they onboard on this thinking, the direction, they planning to take every, let's say, sizing collection, and they go into to look at it in the code, implement that across the board. They're going to take typography. Instead of just primitive, they're going to add the layer of semantic, because I'm not like inventing new sizes. I'm not inventing new things. I'm just abstracting layers.
You're systematizing what's already there, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
Naming things properly. So instead of like white background, it's surface small, surface medium. You know what I mean? Naming things and then adding small increments. For example, we had a lot of snowflakes around inverse tokens. If there's a black background or a brand color background, then what type of button to put is always snowflake. So made that as a native to the system so that it's kind of like be replaced or adopted seamlessly. So this is kind of like how we are approaching it so far.
That's interesting. And one of the folks on the deep dive brought up this idea that when they release something new, that it is sort of creating a bit of work for consuming teams. It's like a breaking change of some kind. They are also releasing some tooling that helps with those teams in the migration to sort of like resolve the break. Are you all experimenting with that kind of thing at all too? Or has that not been a part of the approach you've taken so far?
No, we're trying to not make any breaking changes, right? Like if there is an existing, let's say, a token set, like spacing that already exists, we're not going to change the names of these tokens because that's a breaking change, for example, because it's not worth it, right? So we kind of making like pick your battle. Yeah. And in terms of component design, like, again, I'm trying to support what's live today, give it names, put it in within the existing architecture, and then adding new things to it so that I avoid that breaking change. So this is kind of like the strategy. It works for my case, but it might not work for everyone, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So solution needs to be kind of contextual to your company need.
Yeah, of course. It's almost like this feels a little bit like sort of an approach to say, what's a middle ground we can get to that kind of honors the existing design in our products. And then from there, maybe we can sort of do another round of evolution on the system that would enable change in the end products. Is that kind of the mentality? Or
yes, exactly. Like if we really wanted to remove borders from all the cards in the future, let's do it. But today, cards have border.
Yeah.
Until everyone migrated to the new version and it's all well adopted, I feel safe making the change because it's a global change,
Yeah.
right?
Gotcha. Interesting. Oh, that's so cool. I love hearing how teams approach this kind of thing. It's not simple, right? Like there's a lot of moving parts, and when we try to do this well, we have to make sure we're also leaving our consuming teams feeling well supported through this kind of change. So it's really critical. I like this approach. Um, so we talked a little bit about we talked about the iterative approach you've taken. We did spend quite a bit of time in the session talking about this idea of like multiple versions of things. And this is sort of another approach. And, I think Guy gave us an example where he said, hey, we use semantic versioning. We only do a major release once a year. We do lots of minor releases, and we have months of planning in advance before we do something that breaks. So, I think there's this to me feels like a much larger kind of like enterprise approach to this kind of shift, as opposed to a more iterative, maybe startup-y kind of, startup world kind of feel to the change. We also had folks who said, I do not like the idea of maintaining multiple versions, right? Like I think Liz had a whole thread in the chat that was really good where she was saying, look, I'm a small team. It's just me and a couple people, and we do not have the bandwidth to maintain multiple versions, keep those versions in sync, so we have to sort of like pick and choose where we can put our energy is kind of how I heard her saying that. Do you resonate with one of these two other options as well? Or are you like, how does that sit with you?
Yeah, it was really interesting to hear, different approaches to this, depend on the scale. Like, I love this idea of you have a set release schedule and you're aligning your changes to that. So it's really smart. And everyone was feeling really strongly about not maintaining different version because that's really, really bad.
Yeah, it's hard.
And obviously it's hard, when you have smaller team, and like even the person who was talking about this, she said, I'm like 50-50, it's design system work and product work. So I cannot have space at all to maintain multiple versions. So just kill the old, keep the new, and everyone needs to migrate,
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. It has to be really tailored to your organization. And you should not feel the need that if like we all agreed on the change, then we should all commit to it. Like just leaving all the version, it's creating debt for design and engineering. So let's all move forward. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, Taylor it kind of jumped in at one point and asked us, he kind of said, hey, I have a poll I want to do. He said, raise your hand if you have had a formal mandated migration period from one version of a system to another. I think he was trying to get at like, is this even a reality that teams have, right? Like that we would build a new version somewhat in isolation from the reality of the current version. Like, again, this is that branching model of like, let's start with something fresh, iterate or build this thing into something brand new, and then have a moment in time where we say, okay, migration starts now and it will end by this date. And only, I think it was like a quarter of the people raised their hands that this is something that was accessible to them, So, and I don't know, I didn't look to see what the size of those orgs were, but I would bet those were larger organizations, where that was an approach. So I don't know. What did you think about this poll?
Yeah, it was excellent. It's really made a good point. No one is going to pause and do migration, except if you have 20 engineers on the design system team to do that.
Yeah.
Nobody had the time or the energy to stop and do migration. Like it needs to be really tailored to like features that we want to ship today, things that make money to the company. That's why we're all here, right? You need to think about the business aspect. Everyone boss to do migration is taking away from actually shipping work that needs to go out. So really depend on the size of the company and the business prioritization, basically.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just thinking, we didn't really talk about this in the deep dive, but just hearing you talk about this, I'm wondering about a model where if you have sort of a reasonably sized design system team, maybe let's just say you have 10 people, right? Like that's a pretty good sized system team, right? If that's your scenario, I wonder if it would be better to have that team wholly focused on evolving the system and, doing the education and whatnot and engaging with other teams in terms of learning what they should be building. So they're making a product that teams want. But that would be one approach, right? It's like I have a consuming team and I have a system team, and the system team focuses on the system and the consuming team focuses on the product. Another model I'm just thinking about would be, what if we split the system team in half and we had 5 people who were working on evolving the system? We still have the consuming teams working on product, but now we have this middle ground team that is like a little bit like split, right? Their job is implementing the system in product. And it's not full implementation, right? Because the product team needs to learn how to use the system, of course. But in scenarios where there's a new team coming on board as a consumer or an adopter, where there's a big rollout of breaking changes, things like this, where there's a bigger impact on the consuming teams, if we had a subset of the system team that's job was to go in and like help them do this well, I wonder if that would help. It wouldn't even have to be a large number of folks. I don't know. That's maybe something to think about.
That's actually, I experienced that when I was at Square, where we had, 30 folks on the engineering side, multi-platform, and design side. We had a team. There's a design manager that advocate for design system work. So in that situation where the company is 20,000 employees, we did have that leverage. And actually what we call it was like a rotation embed, where some engineers would depend on the roadmap because everything is defined in advance. We know that we're going to have capacity on the system team to support that team's implementation of the certain component or experience. So we would send out people from design or engineer, not just engineers, embed on that team for a quarter or so to help them. And we would also want other teams, consumer team, to get familiar with system work. So we would borrow engineers to come and help us. And we did this on system design and engineering, and it was really successful when you have the manpower to do that.
Yeah, that's really great. And just the empathy building that happens when you do that, like consuming teams, individuals on consuming teams coming and spending time with the system team, understanding the challenges that we face, and likewise, the system team going out and being a part of the product and getting to know those customers better, I mean, there's so much benefit there. When I've seen this kind of thing happen, this sort of like, individual exchange program sort of thing, ambassador program or whatever. One of the challenges I think is it can also be disrupting for those teams to have like somebody new popping in just for a quarter, right? Like there's the onboarding and offboarding and all that has to happen. And so I think there are pros and cons to that, but it sounds like you had a great experience with it. So that's cool.
Yeah.
There's one other thought that I had, which is I feel like we spent a good amount of time talking about this idea of like the system is the place for standardization, not necessarily the place for innovation. And it's an interesting quote. This was Taylor who kind of made that statement. And I think we had some back and forth on this. Like, what's your take there? Do you agree with that statement?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really well put because, well, my experience was rebuilding right now. I basically kind of stated the same situation where I'm trying to adopt the existing things in the system so that this is gonna become standardization and everyone adopt, and then we can innovate after. If the product team in the future decided they don't want the card to have XYZ styling or the button styling looks like this, we can do that because it's standardized within the system. So yeah, this system is really true, and a lot of teams to adopt this mental model, they need to change a lot, like because some product team that I worked with, they are expecting this new things to happen within the system team, but system team doesn't have capacity to innovate new things because product team are the one that's going to be expert in their field, in their consumers. We're here to serve you, not serve the consumers. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I think I might tweak this statement a little bit, like if I was going to say it, and not because it's wrong, but because I think I would avoid the negativity in it. So the system is the place for standardization, not innovation. I would maybe say the system is the place for standardization so that product teams can innovate. You know what I mean? Like we give them the space to go do that, you know? And I think both are really important. And that I think that's, you know, that's a big part of what we're tasked with in the org is just like identifying the standards that sort of emerge and encouraging folks to follow those when it makes sense. One thing I see in my coaching and consulting work is a lot of times the leadership is sort of pushing hard for innovation. And they say that in kind of a very generic way, right? They structure how people are rewarded and evaluated in their career path on have you innovated. But it's actually, I feel, a little bit dangerous to just say, hey, we're an innovative company, everybody should be innovating, because that is actually not true. If all you do is innovate, you have nothing, you know? And so there has to be space for that innovation to be standardized, you know, and that's what I like about Taylor's statement here. But I think the job of a system team is to be really clear and articulate the decision frameworks for when do you standardize and when do you innovate. And that's a question that most teams don't know how to answer. Is that something you've had experience trying to figure out, like how to make that choice?
Yeah, I think it comes down to really have a great relationship with your product team, right? So that they can see you as the one to go to kind of like think about new ideas. Because like I, for example, was working with a product team on this new pattern that they want to introduce, and they created a branch in the library and they put it there and they're like, review.
Yeah.
And I go on and I look, everything looks amazing. And yes, this should be in the system, but how you thought about breaking it down into reusable component, it's not right,
Yeah.
right? That's our job to come in and work together on things. And, oh, actually, this in the system, we call it X, and we can standardize it this way so it can be reused over there and over there. Like
Yeah.
you're thinking horizontally versus your product designer is thinking just within the bounds of their area, right?
Yeah.
So this is how we can like work together to
Yeah.
make things available to everyone and to kind of introduce that innovation within the system as we go.
Yeah.
This is how I think about it.
I love that. I love that. Shimaa, thank you so much for making space in your day and in this week to kind of help me dig into the data, help me facilitate the deep dive, and even just to have this conversation as a recap. I appreciate your time, your expertise. You've been very generous with your knowledge, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ben. I'm really excited to be here, and it was a great experience. So thank you.
Excellent. We'll see you again soon, everybody. Thanks for listening in. Cheers.